This lesson should give you the tools that you need to recognise social engineering attacks and stop them in their tracks wherever possible. You'll learn the methods attackers use and the predictable behaviours they exploit in order to infiltrate organisations and compromise their valuable assets. We'll start by defining social engineering. We'll look at motivation and manipulation involved in an attack and the methods used to track people without them realising. These will include pretexting, phishing emails, pharming, insiders and fraudulent activity. Then we'll touch on misinformation and influence campaigns before listing the best practices for improving resilience against these kinds of attacks. Social engineering is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that may be used for fraudulent purposes. Ask any security professional and they'll tell you that the weakest link in the security chain is the person who accepts a person or scenario at face value. It doesn't matter how many locks and deadbolts are on your doors or windows, or if you've got guard dogs, alarm systems, floodlights, fences with barbed wire, and armed security personnel. If you trust the person at the gate who says he's the pizza delivery guy and you let him in without first checking to see if he's legitimate, you are completely exposed to whatever risk that he represents.
Social engineering is a sort of vein of hacking where, as opposed to attacking the programmatic or the property, you start attacking the people. And you can do that in a number of different ways, starting with pretending to be someone that you're not, making a phone call, stuff like phishing. All of this stuff falls into the social engineer's toolkit because all of it is around the area of attacking a person. Social engineering is important to be aware of in the workplace because it allows attackers to easily gain access through individuals who aren't being vigilant and don't understand the techniques. One of the most important ways to protect against social engineering is having multiple verification methods, whether that's actually phoning someone and ensuring that it's them on the other side of the line, going to meet them in person, or even something as simple as closing the door behind you.
The types of information social engineers are seeking can vary, but when individuals are targeted, these criminals are usually trying to trick you into giving them your passwords or your bank information or access to your computer to secretly install some malicious software. Criminals use social engineering tactics because it's usually easier to exploit your natural inclination to trust than it is to discover ways to hack your software. For example, it's much easier to fool someone into giving you their password than it is for you to try hacking their password, unless the password is really weak, of course. The tactics they use to effectively hack the human components of a system or network are based on exploiting 6 main vulnerabilities that we all have in varying degrees. These are authority, where an attacker will pose as a person with higher status or represent another person of greater importance than the target. Social engineers can also try to create a sense of urgency. For example, urging a target to act quickly to help them, otherwise something bad will happen, or they create a stressful situation in which it appears to be the best for both parties if the interaction is as brief as possible. Social proof uses the validation of others to persuade the target that doing what the attacker wants has been done by many others before and it's safe or correct to do so. A kind of peer pressure, if you will. We've all witnessed the scarcity tactic, and we see it all the time in retail and on commercial sites where the seller promotes the notion that this is the last one. This one is often combined with the urgency tactic, i.e. buy it now, to create a more powerful motive for the target. Likability is the classic law of assisting a likable character, so a celebrity for example, and is the reason attractive attackers can use flirtatious behaviour to get a result. Finally, and probably the most powerful motivation an attacker will prey on, is fear. Frightened targets make simple mistakes, and we are all the easier to manipulate when we're acting in fear. A good social engineer will use a combination of as many of these motives as they can to create the greatest chance of success. Social engineering is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into divulging confidential or personal information that might be used for fraudulent purposes, and they may include the following. Hoax is a term that we're probably all familiar with, and in terms of cybercrime, are usually emails typically arriving in chain letter fashion that often describe impossible events, highly damaging malware, or urban legends. Their intent is often to frighten and mislead recipients and get them to forward to friends. Shoulder surfing, which is fairly self-explanatory, involves looking over a shoulder or observing covertly a target's actions to gain their personal information. Diversion theft is where a delivery driver is conned into picking up or dropping off a package from the wrong location to either facilitate delivery of a false package or to gain access to a real package for the wrong recipient. Tailgating is where a bad actor will follow closely behind an authorised person to gain unauthorised access before the door closes. Dumpster diving involves rummaging through bins in search of valuable information that can be used fraudulently. Baiting attacks use a false promise to appeal to a victim's greed or curiosity. Users are lured into a trap that either steals their personal information or infects their systems with malware. These attacks usually appear in the form of a physical media device such as a USB thumb drive. A watering hole attack is a social engineering technique where cybercriminals discover and observe the most frequented websites of a particular organisation. They will then try to attempt to infect these sites with malicious code so that unsuspecting users will fall victim through infected links such as downloads, for example. Cybercriminals may also decide to attack specific IP addresses, and that's really to uncover certain information that they're looking for, which in turn makes attacks harder to detect and take preemptive action against. Pretexting is a form of social engineering in which an attacker tries to convince a target to disclose valuable information to gain unauthorized access to a system or service. To do this, the scam artist will fabricate a story or pretext that will fool the target. The pretext generally casts the attacker in the role of someone in authority who has the right to access the information that they're after, or who can use the information to help the target. The most vulnerable targets are usually predisposed to be helpful, unsuspecting, and unlikely to get suspicious, happy to take instruction and unlikely to raise the alarm. An attacker will also work hard to hide their identity and pose as someone else. They will create the scene, make unusual requests and manipulate the target to extract valuable information. Security is all about knowing who and what to trust. It's important to know when and when not to take a person at their word, and when the person that you're communicating with is actually who they say they are. The same is true of online interactions and website usage. When do you trust that the website that you're using is legitimate or safe to provide your information? Here are a couple of examples of phishing emails from reputable organisations. See if you can spot what's wrong with this email. There's a clear call to action that involves the input of sensitive information, and this should alert you that something's not quite right here. The spelling and grammar in this PayPal email is also slightly off, and if you ever ask for your informations, you should probably report the email to the NCSC as soon as you realise that English is probably not the author's first language. A call to action is also present here, and a clear attempt to make the email look like it's from PayPal has also been made. More detailed advice about phishing emails is in our lesson about phishing. Pharming is a cyber attack intended to redirect a website's traffic to another fake site. It can be conducted either by altering the host file on a victim's computer or by exploitation of a vulnerability in a DNS server software. Probably the most dangerous and difficult to detect, insider threats work from within an organisation to gain trust and access to business critical systems and do damage by selling sensitive information to competitors. Once authorised access is gained, they can deploy keyloggers and create backdoors in the network with a view to continue to collect information and pave the way for further remote attacks. Data loss protection systems can be implemented to track data movement and potentially identify insiders. If you've seen the film Catch Me If You Can, you may be familiar with the exploits of Frank Abagnale Jr., an American fraudster who successfully used numerous social engineering techniques to create false identities and forge checks to live a lavish lifestyle and cheat his way into the high-profile jobs of various professions. Fraud is a wrongful or criminal deception intended to result in financial or personal gain, and Frank was a master of this. He did, however, end up getting caught, and eventually his skills were put to good use by the FBI to lessen his prison sentence and capture the fraudsters. Influence campaigns, including dissemination of propaganda, hybrid warfare, and electoral interventions, are typical examples of nation-state activity and cyber warfare. They're typically conducted to disrupt the socioeconomics of another state or meet a favourable political agenda for the attacker. Here we have a list of best practices to help avoid various elements of social engineering attacks. Shredding documentation will prevent dumpster divers from getting their hands on valuable information that's carelessly discarded. Unfamiliar portable drives should never be integrated with business systems and should be reported and destroyed. Create controls to prevent unauthorized access and never share authentication details. Shielding with hands, screening calls, encrypting emails, and tracking shipments will help to protect data, and implementing a rigorous training regime for staff and peers will ensure that they're always as knowledgeable and vigilant as possible. So just to summarise what we've gone through in this lesson, we've looked at motivation and manipulation, social engineering methods, pretexting, pharming, insider threats, fraud and scams, and influence campaigns, before finishing up with user best practices to mitigate these issues. That's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one.